Welcome to Don't Wait Till Pigs Fly with host Nancy Becker on Global Voice Radio. Nancy and her guests will share tips and recommendations on moving forward in your life and business now and not waiting till pigs fly. Here's your host, Nancy Becker.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another edition of Don't Wait Till Pigs Fly, a conversation between business owners and experts who share their tips and strategies to help us all not sit around waiting for pigs to fly, but to get out there, put these things into practice, and soar higher. Today, I'm excited to be talking with Richard, who is a communications professional who works for a public figure the other side of the Atlantic. He's been a journalist, an editor, and news anchor for a number of different radio news organizations, including a duty editor for ITN, the second biggest broadcast news organization in the UK behind the BBC. He's a former vlogger, having had a YouTube channel with over 1.7 million views. He's a media trainer and has worked with politicians, campaigners, and businesses of all sizes. He's also about to launch a new podcasting app, but he says his real passion is helping people find their story and delivering it in a way the media and new media want to hear. Welcome, Richard.
Hello, Nancy. Thank you so much for having me. Sorry for making that bio so long, giving you too much information there. It just went on forever.
No, it's interesting. I love hearing all that about all these wonderful things, everybody.
It's weird hearing it sent back to me. It's like, yeah, did I really do that? I did. Anyway.
No, it's amazing, when you think about,
it's an exciting road.
It's wild. Well, welcome, and I know that my listeners are going to be really excited to hear all of your wonderful words of wisdom. So let us jump right in. And I have a question for you. Let's say I have a business, and I don't think I have a story to tell.
Yep.
How do I get the media's attention?
Okay, huge question, that one. My first thought on that one is obviously with you, Nancy. The reason we all listen to your podcast is we're doing this because it's obviously business. We're not trying to get a particular news story across. We're ultimately trying to market our businesses, aren't we? My expertise is the marketing, and everyone else has got different aspects of that. So the first thing you've got to think about is, will the media actually be interested in you? And the answer is yes, probably. Because what actually is a media expert? A media expert is someone that's got a little bit more knowledge about something than the audience. And if you're going to the general media or even to niche media, the reason you're probably going on there is because you've got something interesting to say that can add to that audience's knowledge. So you are an expert. Whatever you do currently, I mean, in your case, you're a business expert that knows how to get companies doing really well. That's a talent that you can pass on to other people. We were talking before this as well. I was talking about an organization that was a justice campaign organization. And there was a chap we used to interview on the radio who was he gave brilliant sound bites. A really interesting guy. And he was always there. Whenever we needed a comment on something to do with crime, he was always there. And it was only after I left media that I found out that his big organization that we thought it was had, guess how many members?
Have no idea. 2 or 3?
1. It was him. And yet his punching power was enormous. So if you've got something interesting to say, if you can get a good story across to the media, there's every chance you could literally be on CNN tomorrow if you pitch it right. Go on, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's the question is, how do you pitch it? You know? That's the whole, you got to say something that's going to catch, you have so little time, you've got to catch their attention really quickly.
So first thing you've got to think about is what actually is your aim? What are you trying to achieve? And I don't mean just, I want to get more customers. What is the message that you're actually trying to get across? Is it a particular product? Is it a brand that you're trying to get across? And you've got to define that first. Then you've got to come up with your lines. What are your core messages that you're trying to get across? You've got to define what you want to do before you ring up a media organization and say, give me coverage, because why would they bother?
Mm-hmm.
Unless you've got something, unless you know why, and you can pitch it to their audience, they're not going to be interested. So once you've worked out that, and we can do an interesting exercise on that in a moment. Once you've worked out what that story is you're trying to get across, think about who you're approaching. What do their audience want? What is the value that you can give to their audience? As I say, no journalist, no media organization, put it bluntly, gives a damn about you. They don't care about your business. They don't care about you making profit. They care about their audience. And if you can give them something that their audience wants, then they're going to be interested. So you've got to pitch it that way. And then in terms of pitching to the press, so we can talk about exact stories in a second. Press releases do vaguely still work, but people are more interested now in short broadcast notices, like one paragraph that sums it up. Journalists do not have the time that they used to have. They've got a huge inbox full of stuff. They're scanning through it in a couple of seconds. And if they can't work out the story in 2 or 3 seconds, they'll ignore it. So you've got to keep it tight as well. In terms of what actually is your story, probably the easiest way to illustrate this is, well, let's take you, Nancy. I mean, what have you got coming up at the moment in terms of your sort of business projects?
Okay. Well, I actually have the 11th annual Dream Big Retreat coming up in October, and that's
sounds fantastic.
It's a business conference that is kind of like these podcasts. You know, it's going to have a lot of really well-known speakers there who are going to be sharing their ideas and their experiences, and actually sitting down and helping the attendees to create goals and businesses for themselves. It's exciting.
So, okay, so let's take that event. So let's say you're trying to pitch that now to the media. Mm-hmm. What you've told me is what the value is to business people. So who would be the target audience that you want to reach?
If you have been in business for 3 or 4 years and you kind of get it, that there's work that still has to be done. I just told somebody the other day, you can make a really good widget, but if you don't know how to sell it, if you don't know how to price it, if you don't know who's going to buy it, nobody's going to buy it. Yep. So it's the business people who know they don't know and want to know.
Yep. Okay, so your target market, so in other words, there is no point you going on something about history, right? So for starters, you already know the kinds of people you're going for. Equally, there's no point particularly going on to, say, a political show on a news channel. You're more interested in the business show.
Right.
And frankly, if you pitch a business story to the political show, they're probably just going to completely ignore it. Whereas the business people are more likely to. So again, you've got to think about your message. So then the next thing is, well, what actually is the story? What is the hook that people are going to be interested in now? Because at the moment, although we know you're going to give great value, why is that different to any other event that's going on?
I do not believe that any of the other business conferences out there allow the individual attendees to have one-on-one time with the speakers to actually create a project.
Okay.
If the business owner has something they want to do, they can sit down with the individual speakers, and the individual speakers can help them work out a strategy.
But why is that particularly interesting now? Why is that going to stand out? Why? It sounds like the kind of thing that almost anyone could do. I'm playing devil's advocate here for a reason, and this is what I do with people. Because you find then that you get to what that core story is.
Well, I believe there's like 5.9 million non-employee based businesses in the United States right now. Right. And 1 out of 5 is the number that will last longer than 5 years.
Okay.
And so most businesses will sit back and say, hey, I've got a Facebook page, I've got, business cards, I'm ready to do business. And that doesn't happen. It's just being someplace where you've got cheerleaders is great. And it gives you ideas, and you go, okay, that's super. And you go home after the end of the meeting, and it goes up on the bookshelf, and you never think about it again.
Yeah.
But if you are actually given the tools for your own particular individual business, then you've already got a head start, and you can't help them do it.
The only thing we've got at the moment is that this could be replicated, or that would be the feeling that it can be replicated in other places. So what we've got to look for when we're looking for this angle is what makes you unique. What is it that you're doing which either is the event is different, or there is some particular hook that you can put it onto? I mean, one of the things you're sort of saying there is that this is about giving people advice. And I don't know whether America is there sort of a general advice network? Is there any kind of scheme that helps businesses?
Well, anybody and everybody these days. I mean, just sit down and Google coaches, and there's 5 million of them that pop up.
Yeah.
But the standard phrasing for most coaches out there is, I was living in my car 4 months ago, and now I'm making 7-figure income. They don't really give you, and it's not advice. It's actual sitting down and creating the plan, creating the steps. If you do this, if you do this, if you do this, you go from point A to point Z, you will have a business.
Yeah.
It's not just general broad advice.
So what we've got to do is we've got to try and find some sort of news hook to put this onto, because you've got to get something which is a really clear, finite message. And my gut feel from what you're saying there is that this is about making businesses successful. You said about how many fail, statistically how many fail. I mean, do you have any?
Makes it, yeah.
It's staggering. Do you have any statistics on how many businesses succeed if they do your sort of training?
Absolutely. The statistics will jump up to 4 out of 5.
That's really interesting. So is there a lack of training going on with small businesses that should be more provided for by people like yourself? Is there an angle like that you can almost say, well, because of the lack of it, all these businesses are failing, but if you do this kind of training, it will change? You've got a statistic there. You can latch onto that. So what is that? 80% of businesses succeed.
I'm sorry?
80% of businesses succeed if they do this sort of training.
Yep.
So in other words, I'm sort of taking this on here, and correct me if you think it's wrong, but 80% of small businesses could succeed in America if this kind of training was available to everyone.
Correct.
There's a hook. You constantly, I mean, I didn't realize it was as bad as it was when you said that 1 in 5 businesses fail. But if that's a figure that's being put around all the time, that's a sort of general assumption of journalists as well. And if you can come up with a statistic and show that, you've got a hook there. So I think always with any business, in my experience, if you start doing that, it takes a few minutes, as we just did there, to sort of find where there's something which is a clear message. But there's always something. And whatever business people are involved in, I think there is always something that you can find that hook. The other thing as well is that you might go, well, okay, you've got an event that you want to promote. Well, yes, there's a sort of association with that figure, but where do I get in my line about, well, sign up at this website? But when you're trying to get into traditional media or even new media, you've got to have a hook to open the door. Once you're on, you can deliver your message. Because the journalists will not care about, again, as I say, your business. What they're interested in is the top line. When they introduce you as Nancy Beecher from When Pigs... Sorry, I'm getting this wrong. When Will Pigs Fly? When they introduce you as that, that's when you're getting your plug. And that's when you can put into your lines that message about the event. And you can say, well, what we found at a recent event that I organized, and this event that we've got coming up soon, is that 80% of companies are actually succeeding. And that's where you get your message in. But you've got to get your hook first.
Interesting. Very interesting. And it doesn't seem really easy to get that hook. I mean, with you talking me through it, we got it. How does someone who's sitting in their office at their desk all by themselves, how do they do it?
It's questions. It's all about questions. It's about digging. And in a way, One of the things you learn to do as a journalist is you start to become quite brutal. Now, obviously, you've seen sort of TV journalists, and they really hack into things, but you start to get really devil's advocate in your head, and you get really brutal with yourself and at times with guests. And you've got to do that to yourself. And you've got to say this same question over again: why should I care? And it's not because I want people to care, but do I really care? Does that really matter to me? Would I buy it?
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to be absolutely brutal with yourself. And in many ways, get a friend that is not afraid to ask you questions, and ask them to go absolute hammer and tong into you, and just keep going. Why? I was doing a session with, got to be a little bit careful not to identify anything, but in the political world a while back. And this person has incredible knowledge of the subject. But if you're going on and doing a short interview, no one is going to sit there and listen to you do a 40-minute academic speech. So I said to her, okay, so what would you do in this particular situation? And she would start off. And I said, I don't care. Just tell me in one sentence. Why? What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? And I kept saying this until we got down to one sentence that was absolutely nailed it. And that's what you got to do. And you don't need me to do that. You can, just by being aggressive with yourself. Why do I care? Why should I care? What does that mean? And once you nail that down, then you got something.
It's hard work.
But it's worth it, Nancy. You think about it. How much if you could literally be on a cable news network reaching millions of people tomorrow for the sake of spending half an hour doing this, how much would that cost in advertising?
Oh, absolutely. And it's really incredible. But, unfortunately, I see a lot of people that don't or won't take the time. They don't really understand that this is what it takes. And I think you also have to be careful that you don't burn bridges. If you send the wrong message, if you send it to the wrong people, if you tick off the reporters in some way or another, they're never going to take anything from you.
Absolutely. So first of all, don't waste their time. They, as I say, it's worse now than ever because newsroom budgets have been slashed. They do not have time. So don't ring them up and pester them over something which they're not going to be interested in. Think what the value is to their audience. Give them something they're interested in. When you generally ring up a newsroom, I can almost guarantee it, the first reaction you'll get from someone that's never heard from you before is a gruff response. It's like, what do you want?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you then, and I've done this enough times being the other side of the fence as well, pitching stuff, if you give them something in a 1 or 2 sentences and it's of interest to their audience, their voice will change. Then you've got to make it as helpful as possible. So if they ring you up, if it's in the middle of the night at 3 o'clock in the morning and you've never been on this organization before, you pick up that phone and you say, yes, I will do the interview. Don't go, oh, it's not convenient right now, I'm a bit tired.
Yeah.
They will never ring you back again.
No.
Now, if you've done 10 interviews with them and given them great content, then there's a chance they will go, oh, okay, once. But the first time, you absolutely have to roll over backwards to give them what they want.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's another easier way to get in. And an important thing with journalists is to build a relationship with them. And the thing that journalists love doing is having people providing more fuel for a story they are already interested in. Okay, so in the morning when the news agenda comes together, for example, if you're trying to pitch on the daily news, they kind of all look at each other. We used to do this all the time. Look at each other, and the news agenda becomes that formed. And once they've decided what the stories matter, they don't really want someone else that's going to raise something new because it just makes it harder work. But if you can add a comment, and this is where what you should be doing as a small business, is you should be watching the news in your local area, in your local paper, on podcasts as well, and you should be seeing what issues could I add to that conversation. Because if you go along to even a local TV company, if they're talking about a particular sort of business issue in the area, and you say, I've had an experience of that and I'm available, you can come down and interview me in half an hour's time, and they need someone to do now, there's a good chance they'll send the satellite truck down and do it.
Mm-hmm.
So add to that story. One easy way of doing this actually on Twitter is there's a hashtag PR request. There's another one as well, which is HARO, which is HARO. So help a reporter out, blogger requests and things like that. If you search for those, you will find every day there are journalists looking for people. And if you can help them, even if it's not particularly related to you the first time, you build a relationship, you do it again, you build a relationship, and then you can start pitching your story and they go, oh yeah, that person, I know they're good.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been using HARO for years and have built up relationships with people. So that's absolutely true.
Yeah. But the key thing is pitch them a story they want to use.
That's right. Yeah. And, I think that's the same thing as, who's your ideal client? You got to figure that out. And then you've got to figure out what do they care about. And in this particular situation, your ideal client is actually the reporter because they're looking for their ideal client.
Yeah, but it's twisting that message a bit. Mm-hmm. It's saying, what am I trying to achieve? Mm-hmm. And then how can I adjust that message a little bit so that it appeals to the audience that that particular journalist is talking to? So again, if you're a small business person and you're trying to reach your local city, there's no point. If you're an expert in import-export from China, there's no point pitching a story about what's going on in Beijing to your local TV station.
True. Absolutely.
So if your message ultimately is about building my brand and making myself sound like I'm an important local company, it doesn't matter whether you talk about Beijing or whether you talk about the local area, but the local news organization will only care about the local area. So pitch them that story.
Makes a lot of sense.
Go on. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's a lot of people used to ring the newsroom when I was an editor, and they would ring up with to put it bluntly, an awful pitch, and they basically try and give me an advert. And if they just think for a few moments what it is that an audience would actually listen to, I would have been interested.
Mm-hmm.
Just take those few minutes and think about it instead of just sending off some press release willy-nilly.
Yeah, but something that we think is important. Who knows whether it really is or not. You're so right in that we have to figure out, I've got this retreat coming and I think it's really important, but I've got to figure out how to say it in such a way that they're going to be interested in it. So you're absolutely on point with what you're saying.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is what we just did. Well, I'm going, well, why should I care? Mm-hmm. You tell me why I should care. That's what you've got to keep saying to yourself. And it doesn't take long.
No, it's if somebody thinks, I've had too many people talk to me and go, well, I've been in business for 18 years. You can't tell me how to do anything. I know what I'm doing. And 2 weeks later, they're out of business.
Well, from a media point of view, okay, if you've been in business for nearly 2 decades, how much coverage have you had?
Mm.
How many press releases did you send? Did they work?
Absolutely.
They didn't? Then you're doing something wrong. Right. That's not me saying that. There's the evidence in front of you.
Well, and that actually leads me into my next question. I think a lot of people are afraid of approaching the press because they're worried about the sounds of their voices or, oh, my hair's all messed up. I don't want to be seen on TV or, those kids. What do you say to that? How do you get people past those?
First thing I would say is that we all feel that, even if you're a broadcaster. The first time I ever heard myself, and I heard myself on the car radio, and it was a pre-recorded report, and I was driving along with my girlfriend at the time, and I heard it, and I almost put my head in my hands. So for starters, everyone feels it. You're not the only one. But then the next point is that even if 50% of the people that hear you think you look awful and think you sound awful, 50% of the people will think actually what you just said was interesting. And that's 50% more people than you would have achieved if you hadn't done it.
So true.
So if the potential of getting a story out there is worth so much money, it's worth the risk, because those 50% of people that don't like you are not going to hate you. They're just going to forget you. There's so much content going out every day. You're not going to be the one you would really, really have to. I can't even think how. I can't think of a single example where someone has truly fluffed up so badly that it's been remembered. Yeah. Normally it's a politician who's avoiding answering a question that gets replayed. It won't be someone that just went on and was a bit boring and said, something a bit weird.
Yeah, absolutely. And that actually brings me to my next question is, what type of media should small businesses these days be focusing on? Should it be social media? Should it be, newspapers? Are the regular old-fashioned media, are they still valuable?
Yes, I think they are, but I think the world has changed. And I'm glad you brought this up, Nancy, because I tend to do talk about the traditional media because that was obviously my background, but I've been in podcast and YouTuber as well. I think new media is a fantastic opportunity because in the past, as broadcasters, it was a few of us that you had no choice, you had to listen to it. Now, it's about so many different points of view. There's so much content going on. There's so many different conversations. And I think it's tremendously exciting, this opportunity to get involved in it. But it's also, there's a lot of people who are looking for content. So that means that you've got a chance to go on. I mean, as we're doing here, we're discussing ideas. We're sharing ideas. We haven't had to set up the TV cameras. We've literally just gone onto Zoom and we've started having a chat that we can now put out to people and give value to people. So if you're starting out, yes, you could be on CNN tomorrow, but if you're nervous, do a few podcasts first, because a lot of it at times is purely audio as well. So if you want to, literally, you could have some paper in front of you with your notes on it that you can pretty much read out if you're worried about forgetting things. So practice, do some podcasts. Go to someone that's just starting off as well. Someone that's literally got 2 or 3 listeners, and just do it for the practice and build your confidence, build up. The other thing as well, I should say it. I had a really interesting chat with a very senior reporter at the BBC not long ago. And I was saying to him about press releases, and he was saying how press releases are just no longer as relevant now. He said what they tend to do now is that they'll look at Twitter feeds. Okay? But what they will do is, yes, anyone can make a comment, and any topic that's going on, there's thousands of comments. So what they'll look at is, they'll look for someone that's got a reasonable social media following. Because if you've got a following, and you've got a bunch of comments that are coming in, they're going to take you more seriously, and then they're going to go, oh, that could be interesting.
Interesting.
So doing podcasts, doing social media, getting your opinions out there, is all incredibly valuable for building that credibility that then makes the journalist more likely to use you. So yeah, definitely new media.
Makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting because I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, I very, very rarely put anything. I've got accounts on Twitter and on 2 or 3 at Pinterest, different things like that. And I got into Pinterest the other day, and I had like 250 followers, and I don't think I've ever once put anything on Pinterest. It's just,
yes.
And it's going, wow, you've really got to be. It's not just getting the media that you want. Mm-hmm. You got to be careful of what gets out there about you as well.
Yes, but that's, you had a podcast episode recently about branding. And I thought that was really interesting because you've got to think, what am I putting out there and who do I want to be? And people often say to that, well, I don't really know who I want to be. And it's like, well, you've got to come up with a persona, and ideally, it's got to be you, ideally. And if not, you've got to kind of define who it is. The way in business, you think about who is my target market, as often they use the phrase avatar, don't they? That's who is my target market. You've got to do the same for your brand. Who am I? And then, this is something I do with people as well, is that once you've defined that, what would a person who is like that do that would illustrate their brand? So you don't go on there and say, I'm an expert in watches. You talk about watches. You put comments on there about watches. You say the watches that you're currently trying to buy at auction. So what would a person that has that brand, how would they demonstrate that brand? And it's those comments and that criteria that you then use as to what you're putting out there. So, for example, if you're a rock star, there's no point tweeting about castles in Italy, because people are going to think you're a historian, not a rock star.
Mm-hmm.
So define your brand and demonstrate it.
But I think what I was maybe talking about was absolutely, you've got to stick with your brand and all of that, but you don't want to pull up something on Twitter and see, Nancy Becker, Don't Wait Till Pigs Fly is the worst podcast ever in the existence of creation. You want, oh geez, where'd that come from?
The chances of that are very small, and I assure you, working in the political world, I have dealt with far, far worse abuse than you're ever going to get as a podcaster, ever.
Well, I'm sorry.
On a fairly regular basis. So, it's a bit like doing tough interviews as well. You've got to think, if someone is criticizing you, if you respond to it, you respond to something. It depends exactly on the situation, but you can respond to it once, try and diffuse it, but don't let it carry on. Don't fuel that conversation. It's a bit like in the political world, because if media are trying to develop a story and you don't want that story to develop, you don't help them by putting stuff forward and doing interviews and comments on it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very easy, I think, with trolls to feel like, well, if I just explain it, they'll understand. They don't want to understand. They're doing it because they just want to bash you. Mm-hmm. And if you respond to them, you encourage it.
Yeah, I agree.
One other, I would say, the other thing with trolls is that they're the noisy ones. Your supporters are unlikely to say anything, but they're still there. So ignore the trolls and talk to your supporters.
Yeah, just always keep focusing and moving ahead and doing what you set out to do, I think is the best.
Absolutely. If you're providing value, then those are the people that matter, not the one person that said you're rubbish.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Richard, I know that you've got another one of these to do soon, so I'm not going to hold you much longer, but do you have any final bit of advice for everyone?
I think my most important thing is work out what your story is and just start doing it, because there's so much potential marketing you can get from this. You can sit down for hours and try and work out how to do an advert for a local paper, or to come up with the perfect meme to put on social media. But your business, the value that you're giving, the topic area, and if you just start talking about it in the way that you probably talk about to your friends with the same passion and to your colleagues, that stuff is useful. And if it's good stuff, it's going to get shared. It's as easy as picking up the phone, almost like we've just done here, and we've had a chat. It's that easy to do. So start small. Do a couple of little podcasts. Have a bit of fun. And just, if you know your stuff, you've got nothing to worry about brain freeze.
Well, it's obvious you know your stuff. And I know it's been a very, very, very impressive and informative conversation that we've had today.
I could talk for hours, Nancy, as you can probably tell. I'm sorry.
I love it. And I could ask you questions for hours, too. I do so appreciate it. And how would somebody get a hold of you if they had some questions for you?
Okay, well, obviously, as I say, I work in the political world, so things are a little bit sort of under the radar in a way. But what I'm doing is I'm currently working on a new project, which is a personal project I've always wanted when I was a news editor, as a way of connecting podcast guests with hosts. It's a website called Guest Snap, as in the word guest and snap. It's nearly ready. It's something I've been working on myself. Totally free. Oh, I should point out that. It's not something I'm trying to sell. It's totally free. It's a project I've been working on myself. And so I've got a Twitter feed, which is Guest Snap App. So it's Guest Snap and App. And also it's exactly the same on Instagram as well. It's at Guest Snap App. And I've just started doing a couple of little podcasts myself as well. So there's some details on there too. So I'm going to have to get you on mine as well, Nancy, because I want your experience too.
Well, I would love that. That would be wonderful. And so, again, thank you so much for all of this fantastic information, guys. Please, everybody that's listening to this conversation, if you have questions on the media, reach out through one of those different methods that he just told us about. And of course, you know that you're always going to be able to listen to, subscribe, and download to Don't Wait Till Pigs Fly. We air on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Spreaker, iHeart, SoundCloud, and hopefully soon iTunes. So guys, until we meet again, don't sit and wait till pigs fly, but get out there and soar higher now. Thanks, y'all, and you have a great week. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Don't Wait Till Pigs Fly with host Nancy Becker. Join Nancy every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern on Global Voice Radio.